Good morning, St. James. Welcome to worship today. Wanted to share a few things as we get our service underway. One is wanted to acknowledge a transition with Sarah Crisco and her family having to move to the Triangle. We are very sorry to see Sarah go and really appreciated her ministry here. But we're also grateful that Pastor Laura's husband, Daewon Goldenbaum Yang, is going to be able to step in and help us both with children's ministry part-time and also help us with our remote learning for after school. And so very grateful to have Daewon, even as we are sorry to see Sarah go. Our worship services have been different than we had thought they might be over these last few months. Our plan is to continue to worship virtually indefinitely. So even as we are able to worship in person, we want to continue to have virtual worship services so that all those who cannot come or don't feel safe coming to a building can still be a part of worship. And so what we plan to do over the next week, starting next week, is to offer 3 different options for virtual worship. We'll have a traditional service, we'll have a contemporary service, and then we'll also have a blended service like this service that'll feature components of each. Want to just get back as close as we can to our previous rhythms. The trustees will meet this week and prayerfully discern how God might be calling us to move forward in this strange time of pandemic. But we want to do the best we can in the midst of that to offer the most powerful worship that we can. Also next week, I wanted to just alert you that our Blessing of the Backpacks service will be at 4 o'clock, and we'll meet outside for that, outside of the Christian Life Ministry Center. And so I want to encourage people to come with backpacks, with devices, with whatever you'd like to have blessed. And we want to bless children. We want to bless teachers, educators, parents, anybody as this school year begins that's going to be different than any of us would have thought it might be. We really want to cover this time in prayer. Virtual worship is a beautiful thing, but it also can be a challenging thing. And one of the challenges we have is that we are worshiping in physical space we don't often worship in. And so today, I want to really, really encourage you to open your heart to the power and the presence of the Holy Spirit and to allow yourself to fully engage in worship today. Let your heart truly sing to the Lord, and let the Lord truly change you. So friends, with no further ado, let's worship.
This is the day that the Lord has made.
Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
We're the Fishers. I'm Frank.
And I'm Ann.
And we'd like to welcome you to St. James today.
I light this candle to allow Jesus into our hearts as we pray.
God of grace and God of glory, on thy people pour thy power. Crown thine ancient church's story, bring her bud to glorious flower. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the facing of this hour, for the facing of this hour. Lord, the hosts of evil round us scorn thy Christ, assail his ways. Fears and doubts too long have bound us, free our hearts to work and praise. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the living of these days, for the living of these days. Say and to the evils we deplore. Let the search for thy salvation be our glory evermore. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage, serving thee whom we adore. Serving thee whom we adore.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the children's message part of our service today. I'm so excited to see so many of my friends on here with me today. I know it's been a little bit since we've done something like this, so I'm so glad to have us all together. So I want to start today by asking a question. And if you're not here on the Zoom call, feel free to talk about it with your family at home as you watch the service. So my question today is, when have y'all had to be courageous about trying something new? First of all, do y'all know what courageous means? To have courage? It's like if somebody has asked you to do something new and you maybe get like a feeling in your belly, if you get a little nervous or scared, but you know you can do it. So it's all about trying something new, maybe something that you thought could be really hard, but you tried and tried. Have you all learned how to do anything new? Maybe over the summer while we've been home? Hope, what have you learned?
Learning how to ride the bike without training wheels.
That is a perfect example. How many times did it take you to get that? How many times did you try?
Probably 25.
Probably 25? Yeah, that's good. What about you, Tyler? What did you learn to do?
So it's been like a thing in the George family for like a long time, when someone always competes to become the champion. I originally beat Mommy, but Haley had beat her first. She was the last champion standing, so I challenged Haley to beat her. And then I made a bad decision and challenged Mommy. And then once we did it 3-on-3, Haley and Mommy and me, I beat both of them, which means that I'm back the champion. I'm gonna stay my ground, that way I can battle my nana.
Well, that took a lot of courage for you to do all that. That's awesome. What about you, Sophia?
Swimming.
Swimming?
Swimming without her floaty.
Swimming without your floaties. That is awesome. And did you just jump in one day or do that, or did you have to practice at that?
I had to practice.
Was it a little scary the first time you did it? But you tried and tried, and then it wasn't so scary anymore, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have something that they want to share? Yes, Drew?
Jumping in the pool without my goggles.
Jumping in the pool without your goggles. That's another thing that takes a lot of courage. Anybody else? Eleanor?
When I was 3, I went to my swimming class, and first I didn't want to get in because I couldn't swim, so it was kind of scary.
But you had that courage and you tried, right? And it's not about learning how to swim after the class or learning how to do things perfectly after you try it the first time. It's about the fact that you continued to try, and you felt the faith that God had in you to keep on going, right? So sometimes we learn it's not about what we do, it's about how we do it and how we have the courage. And you know what? We are all special because we know that we have God's love and that He helps us. Don't we know that? Do you think that Jesus asked the disciples to do things that may be kind of scary? Yeah. Pastor Garrett today is going to talk about something maybe a little scary that he asked one of his followers to do, and it was to walk on water. Do y'all think you could do that? No, you think people were a little scared? A little bit, but you know what? It wasn't about if he could do it or not. It's about that he had the faith in Jesus when Jesus asked him to do it. Just like we all have faith in ourselves. And you know what's something new that we're about to do? We have a new school year starting soon. Yeah, how many of you need some courage to start school? Yeah. How many of you may have a teacher that you also call mom or dad? Maybe part of the time? I bet all of our parents, I think we should pray for them too, right? They need some courage. I bet this is all their first time teaching. Maybe some of them. Yeah? Well, you all are going to do great. You know that you have the church who loves you, Jesus loves you, we love you. So you all have courage, and remember all those different times when we kind of had hard stuff to do and we knew we could do it. Yes? Eleanor, do you have something to say?
Jesus does whatever he wants because he can do anything.
That's right. Jesus can do anything. Right? And with Jesus' loves, you can do anything too, Eleanor. That's right. All right, guys, we are going to end today with a prayer. So if y'all can put our hands together and we can bow our heads and we can pray out. Dear God, thank you for your unconditional love and support. Help us remember your strength as we try new things and go into different situations. We know it's about your love and courage, not just how we succeed or fail. In your name we pray, amen.
Hey St. James, thank you for providing virtual worship during times of social distancing.
Thank you for continuing services to support our community.
We're grateful for Bible study and small group opportunities.
Thank you for continuing to bless our church with your contributions that help support our missions and ministries at St. James.
Fairest Lord Jesus, ruler of all nature, O thou of God and man the Son, thee will I cherish, thee will I honor, thou my soul's glory, joy, and crown. Fair are the meadows, fairer still the woodlands, robed in the blooming garb of spring. Jesus is fairer, Jesus is purer, who makes the woeful heart to sing. Fair is the sunshine, fairer still the moonlight, and all the twinkling starry host. Jesus shines brighter, Jesus shines purer than all the angels heaven can boast. Beautiful Savior, Lord of all the nations, Son of God and Son of Man, glory and honor,
Elijah's name is synonymous with the best of prophets. In chapter 17 of 1 Kings, he burst onto the scene, predicting a drought and then miraculously enabling a widow to provide some meal and oil that would last for years. And then he raised her son from the dead when he died. And then Elijah met those prophets of Baal, a false god of the cow. And they met on top of a mountain, and they could not light a fire, and Elijah was able to, and he defeated them in this prophet's face-off. But then the tide turns very suddenly. Jezebel, queen of Ahab, hears of what Elijah has done to these prophets, and she is furious. And she sends a note to him, and Elijah flees the scene. He is fed by an angel, and then wanders in the wilderness for about 40 days. And it's then that he makes his way to a mountain, and it's here that we hear a little bit about this scene of an interaction with God. And it's the 19th chapter, and I'll start reading in verse 9. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" I've probably preached on this passage a half dozen times, and I've read it easily hundreds of times. And every time I've looked at it, it's always been the same thing that just totally seizes my imagination. It's that sound of sheer silence, the still small voice, as the King James Version translates it. And I think part of the reason why that phrase, why that moment in the story of Elijah is so captivating is that it comes in the midst of the swirl of the earthquakes, the fire, the chaos, the noise, the wind. All of that swirls around in our lives, and the busyness of our lives, the full calendars, the ways where it can be so hard to have a moment to breathe. That has made that part of the passage stand out powerfully to me. And yet, in this reading, perhaps because our time is so different and our calendars aren't quite the way they normally would be in mid-August, and our life expectations aren't what they were last August, and we're experiencing things differently than we're used to, and perhaps a little more stillness looms in our lives. Perhaps because of that, as I read through this passage this week, there was something else that stood out to me that I've never noticed before in all the times that I have looked at this passage, and that is this: the two questions that surround that moment of Elijah's interaction with God in the sheer silence and the still small voice. The same question asked twice. What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here, Elijah? Perhaps it's in the stillness of this time that we can hear more clearly the question God is asking us. Now, I don't know about you, but I know I automatically bristle just a little bit when people start peppering me with questions. There is a tenseness that comes from questions, because when people ask us questions about ourselves, we want to justify ourselves. We want to come off sounding good. We want to give answers that put those questions to rest and allow us to feel good about ourselves. Defensiveness is a natural response when people ask us questions about ourselves. That's what happened in the very first question God asks of Adam and Eve. Just after they have eaten of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, God comes down from heaven to walk with them. And we hear this from Genesis chapter 3. God said to the man, "Where are you?" He said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked and I hid myself." God said, "Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you not to eat?" And then the man says this, "The woman whom you gave to be with me gave me fruit from the tree and I ate." Talk about a defensive response. And then it goes on. Then the Lord said to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent tricked me, and I ate." God's first questions of humanity get met with defensiveness. Oh, she made me do it. Oh, the serpent made me do it. Oh. These questions that come at humanity can make us feel this way. But I wonder if we, in this season of strangeness, in this time, can take a deep breath and in the stillness, in the sound of sheer silence, allow that question, the question of purpose, to come to us and not seek to justify where we are, and not seek to come off as sounding better than we are or worse than we are with false humility, but instead to allow that question, what are you doing here? Let it rest in our hearts and resonate for a while. What are you doing here? Some of us have had that sense of high victory like Elijah had when he defeated the prophets of Baal. Perhaps some of us have had that sense of fear driving us into the wilderness. Some of us perhaps feel as though we have gone 40 days and 40 nights without a drop of water or a morsel of food. What are you doing here? Wherever you are, you are not without an answer to that question. Maybe you've been in a place where your answer will not feel good to say, but acknowledging where you are to the Lord is the first step towards purpose in your life. Maybe you've been in a place where you've been doing great things, but you need a question to stop you in your tracks and consider what's next. What are you doing here? Maybe you just need to keep on keeping on with what you have been doing, but to stop for a moment and to answer that question and consider God asking you of it, what are you doing here, will give you resolve to take the next step. What are you doing here? God has given us life so that we can spread the good news, spread the gospel of love, shine God's light in places of darkness. What are you doing here? We have been given this life, this precious life, for God's purposes. All of us from time to time allow our purposes, our desire, our will to guide our steps. But maybe it's for just such a time as this that God's question of purpose, asked twice of Elijah and asked today of you and of me, maybe that's just the question we need to hear. What are you doing here? May we all search for the answer. Amen.
There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears no burden, where another died for me. There is another in the fire. My dead left for dead beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. And should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning, either way I won't bow to the things of this world. And I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire, standing next to me. There is another in the water, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding what power set me free, there is a grave that holds nobody. Now that power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Oh, the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. There is no other name but the name that is Jesus. He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come what may in the space between all these things unseen and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. No, I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause 'cause I know that's where you'll be. And I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness calls to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between wears thin. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between. Oh, there'll be another in the fire standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
Good morning, St. James family. My name is John Strother, and I'm the newly minted district superintendent for our Sound District, and I'm honored to join you in worship today, honored at the invitation. I thought this morning for the prayers of the people, we might practice an ancient practice brought to us by a Benedictine nun named Juliana or Julian of Norwich. Her practice of prayer dates all the way back to the 14th century, and yet it still brings life to communities all over this world today. It's a simple practice that children and adults can learn to practice together. So we'll practice first. It has 4 movements. The first is await. And as we await, we cup our hands and we stare into what seems to be emptiness, trusting God meets us there. The next movement is the movement called allow. And in allow, we just simply raise our hands toward heaven, open palms, ready to receive. The third movement is called accept, placing cupped hands over our hearts. And then the last movement is attend, outstretched hands, as if to say, take me by the hands, God, and lead me where you would have me go. So again, we'll practice this prayer this morning together in these 4 movements. Await, allow, accept, and attend. Will you pray with me? God of love, help us to keep our eyes open for glimpses of you, to watch for your works, to see your fingerprints, to be alert to all the signs of your presence in our lives, in the world around us, in all the wonders that you've made. Our empty hands remind us of how you can transform emptiness into life, how the barrenness of a womb can become a home for you, the hope of your life and death and resurrection somehow seen in the empty tomb. We come before you today as empty jars of fragile clay, imperfect, but waiting to be filled. In your mercy, enter our emptiness with your fullness. We wait expectantly. With lifted hands, we place ourselves before you, O God, waiting now in quiet surrender. You are our only hope. And so we wait in the stillness before you. In all our ways, we seek to acknowledge your constant good intentions. Every day bears witness to you and your mercies. You, O God, are more than enough. With cupped hands, we feel your life beating in our chest, O God. Every vibration a reminder that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Each breath a gift. Teach us, God of life, to be a people who are content in your care and keeping, even in the midst of need. To learn to be content in plenty or in lacking. Content in you, whether in sickness or in health, in hunger or in abundance, whether living in plenty or in want. And so we stretch our hands out to you, O God. This day we commit ourselves to you again, to your plans and purposes. With outstretched hands, we reach toward your preferred future. Take us where you're going, O Lord, even if it holds the promise of discomfort. Let us walk with you even into the margins, for you are the God who makes your home on the edges, the God who transforms the margins into the new center. Make us willing to leave our comforts in order to embrace your plans and purposes. For we pray together as Jesus taught us to pray long ago.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom comes, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us all our trespasses, and we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you. We love you.
I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead, and buried. On the third day he rose from the dead, he ascended into heaven, and sitteth at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From thence he shall come to judge the quick and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen.
Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You have little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God."
Fear comes in all shapes and sizes, from spiders to darkness to COVID-19. Fear has a way of permeating our lives. And fear permeates our gospel story today also. It shows up 4 times in just 11 short verses. After having fed the crowd of thousands with a few loaves of bread and a couple fish, Jesus eventually sends the disciples out ahead of him to cross the Sea of Galilee while he dismisses the crowd. As the crowd finally disperses, Jesus gets some much-needed solitude. As the disciples make their way across the sea by themselves, they run into a fierce storm. Now, storms were then and today a common occurrence on the Sea of Galilee, but the storm engulfing the disciples in this story, it's particularly fierce. They battle with this storm nearly all night long, unable to travel the short distance across the sea. And that's when Jesus decides, as one does, to catch up with his friends by taking a little stroll across the water. Now, having battled the terrible weather all night long, the disciples, they understandably become filled with fear when they notice this strange, shadowy figure approaching them. We see here the first two occurrences of places where fear permeates the story. We read this in verse 26. The disciples were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost," and they cried out in fear. Now, the Greek word here is phobeo, where we get our English word phobia. Fear comes in all shapes and sizes, and I wonder if you've ever taken a chance to look at a list of all the possible phobias out there. It's pretty amazing, all the different types of phobias that exist. They range widely from familiar phobias, such as arachnophobia, the fear of spiders, and claustrophobia, the fear of tight spaces, to what we might call more unique phobias, like electorophobia, which is the fear of chickens, and paganophobia, which is the fear of beards. It's amazing how many different types of phobias exist in the world. But beyond this fascinating range of phobias, it seems that fear permeates our lives in particularly pressing ways these days. For example, COVID-19 is all around us. It's on our minds all the time, and it's showing few signs of slowing down, and that fills us with fear. Recently, the damage wrought by tropical storm/hurricane Isaias in North Carolina and elsewhere, the shock of the freak explosion in Beirut, Lebanon, that killed many people. Here in the U.S., record levels of unemployment, people fearing how they're going to put food on the table, and that connected to a looming eviction crisis as the eviction moratorium came to an end at the end of July. Challenges around schools reopening for students and parents and teachers and administrators. All of these situations and more fill us with fear in a very pressing way. Fear comes in all shapes and sizes, be it these strange phobias of spiders and chickens to COVID-19 and all that comes with that. Fear has a way of permeating our lives, and that's why, for me, the heart of this gospel story is less about what Peter does or fails to do, and more about who Jesus is, who he is to and for and with the disciples. By extension of the disciples, who Jesus is to and for and with you and me. Now, it's no surprise that the disciples, after the kind of treacherous night that they've had, that they mistake the water-walking Jesus for a ghost. That's not too surprising. Now, in the midst of their terrified cries, Jesus reassures them of who he is. "Take heart," he says, "it is I. Don't be afraid." Now, it's very interesting how Jesus reassures the disciples of his identity. You see, that little phrase, "it is I," that can literally be translated into two words: I am. I am. Now, what's so significant about that? Well, you may recall back in the Old Testament when God calls out to Moses from a burning bush. And in that encounter, at the end, Moses asks God, "Okay, you've called me to serve you and bring a message to the Israelites, but if they ask me the name of the God who is sending me to them, what am I supposed to tell them?" And this is when God famously tells Moses, "I am who I am." This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Now, those two short words, I am, they represent what's often called the divine name. Now, might it be today in our gospel story that when Jesus uses this I am statement, that he's reaffirming his own identity as Emmanuel, as God with us. If he might be saying something like, "Take heart, I am. Emmanuel, God with us, is with you. Don't be afraid. Don't let your phobias get the best of you. I am is with you." Now, the disciples, Jesus seems to be saying, they ought not fear because the presence of the one who's drawing near to them is, in fact, Emmanuel, the very presence of God with us. Peter, though, he's not so sure. He wants to test to make sure that this is, in fact, Jesus. So he says, "Lord, if it's, in fact, you, command me to join you out there on the water." Jesus beckons Peter to come to join him in the rough waters, and somehow Peter summons up the courage to step out of the boat. And at first he appears to make a few successful strides along the water toward Jesus. But as he begins to notice all the chaos around him, the absurdity of the situation that he's gotten himself into, fear once again permeates Peter's heart. We read this, that when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Now, once again, it's here, at least for me, that I think we find the heart of the story, who Jesus is to and for and with the disciples, and with you and me. Jesus sees Peter, his disciple, his friend, beginning to sink, and immediately reaches out and catches him. Jesus, I am Emmanuel, God with us. That's who Jesus shows himself to be, to and for and with the disciples in this story. You see, at each moment in the story that fear permeates the lives of the disciples, Jesus is there. Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us, is that abiding presence in the disciples' lives that steadies them in the chaos. His presence is something that they can be certain of even in uncertain times. When the disciples fear the unknown, who is that ghostly figure approaching us on the water? Jesus says to them, "Take heart. It is I am, is with you. Don't be afraid." When Peter's confidence turns to cowardice, Jesus reaches out and catches him. Jesus, I am, Emmanuel, God with us. This is who Jesus shows himself to be, to and for and with the disciples in this story. An abiding presence, an anchor in the storm. Now, friends, the good news today in this gospel story is that the same Lord who was Emmanuel to and for and with the disciples is the same Lord who is Emmanuel to and for and with us today. Now, as Jesus lifts Peter up into the boat, he makes a remark that's often been interpreted as some kind of chastisement of Peter's lack of faith. Jesus says, "You have little faith, why did you doubt?" Now, rather than chastisement, I can't help but hear a sort of playful banter, a playful tone in Jesus' remarks. A sort of, "Come on, man, you didn't think I'd abandon you, did you?" Now, remember, it wasn't Jesus who commanded Peter to get out of the boat. That was Peter's idea from the beginning. Jesus doesn't demand a faith that's strong enough to somehow sustain water walking. No, it's much simpler for Jesus. It's much sweeter than that. Jesus demands simply a faith rooted in trust. Trust in Emmanuel, God with us. No matter the shape or the size of your fear, trust in Emmanuel. Now, friends, whatever your fears may be today or in the days ahead, trust that Emmanuel's got you. Amen.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, till you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
And now, may the one who is with us in the stillness and in the storm bring you peace, now and forever. Amen.